So question 1 was, which tips, tricks, and/or strategies have you used this year that were effective for introducing and maintaining classroom management routines and procedures?
There's a lot to that.
I know.
Because I feel like it changes every day, you know? I think I think having a routine is really important. I think every day that when the students come in, they're expected to work from the moment they get there to the moment they leave. There should be a procedure in place in effectively doing that. However, there's some things I feel like I do like a little bit differently to shake them up a little bit. Like sometimes I'll do different quieting strategies because I never want them to get too comfortable. But as far as my routine, I try to keep it consistent every day. Come on in, Benson.
Hey, grab a snack. We got pot. We got cake.
Thank you.
I
I'll grab
agree
some
with
on the way
that.
out.
I think you need to kind of change things.
Who else from downstairs is coming up? Did you get
every
Johnson?
so often
He was
because
walking down with
that
George right
element
Awesome.
of surprise
Yeah.
for the kids helps keep.
What tips, tricks, and
class
strategies
Yeah.
have you
I-
used
I
that were
was
effective
surprised.
for classroom management routines and procedures?
So we were talking about how there should be a routine in place. Every morning when they come in, they have something to do. They've got the drill, they've got whatever they do to get started from the moment they get in classroom to the
Okay.
moment they leave. Now from that in between time, you're gonna have a different schedule sometimes every day, but we were also talking about keeping them on their toes. So doing something a little bit different in regards to you're not just reading and doing bookwork all day. Maybe you're getting on your computer, you're watching a video, just different things for them to do, as well as different like strategies to quiet them as well.
Okay.
So sometimes they need to be on their toes. That's kind of what we were talking about.
Routine's important, but at the same time, as we were saying, at the same time, you need an element of surprise every so often.
You need to be able to throw them off. Yeah, definitely. You want to keep them on their toes. Yeah,
Right.
I agree.
Now, I feel like it's changing every day because you figure out what's appropriate for your students. Because I have classes where most of my 6th graders, I can do 1, 2, 3 eyes on me, and it's a little kindergarten thing. But with the 7th graders, they don't respond as well to that. So I find myself doing a different strategy for them. So it's really doing what's appropriate for your room, because especially there's a big difference between 6th and 7th graders.
But then there's also the routine that's there that you have to follow too, because they have to have the expectations of what's going to be next in your day, even if it changes, you know, from the different days of the week. They know what's to be expected on those certain days of the week. So you know, they're not always, you know, and trying to figure out what's going on in your classroom, that it's going to be constant chaos. That they have certain earmarks as to what's going to happen at, you know, maybe a certain time point or a certain place in your instruction as to what's going to happen next.
Yeah, I do the same thing, and I find it helps, like giving your kids the schedule, saying like, hey guys, we're gonna go through our drill, we're gonna do this next, we're gonna learn about this, and then we're gonna finish off the class with this. So how much time we have on that last fun part depends on how we are during that first part.
It must be a math teacher thing, because I do the same thing, and I'll put an agenda on the board
Yep.
so they can look up when
Yeah.
they come in and they know about what we're going to be doing. And the last activity is always more of the fun activity.
Exactly.
And I said, look, you know, you follow along, you get to where we need to go, we're going to have more time to do that.
And I've always broken things up by 15 to 20 minute increments, usually 15 minutes, because that's how things usually flow, and that's how long they have when it comes to attention span and getting things done and moving on to the next thing. So,
Well, it's interesting you mentioned like attention span, especially because us having middle schoolers, and regardless of this population or not, just middle schoolers have such a small attention span. And I believe, if I'm quoting this correctly, it's no more than like 5 or 6 minutes that their actual attention span is. And the fact of if you can have lessons for you can have activities for no more than 15 minutes, then you switch to the next thing, that's probably really important. Because they're not going to be able to focus the entire time, and I think that you got to incorporate that into your routine.
Oh, definitely, and I think the rule I usually go by is it's a minute for like every year that they've lived. So our kids probably, like you said, like 5 minutes, probably close to about 10 minutes of like, then they need some sort of a break, like building something in for them where, okay, now we're going to transition to a new activity. You know, a couple of those in, you're going to do a brain break or something like that, just to keep that energy level down.
One of the problems that I have with taking a break is I use a digital clock, digital like countdown timer, up on my screen in my room, and I like it because it keeps me consistent. I tell my kids that it's to keep them consistent, so that like 5 minutes is 5 minutes, not 7.
Yeah.
But it's, okay, we're gonna take a 6-minute break. I set the timer for 6 minutes, break is over, and then I spend the next 10 minutes getting back on track. And that's the trouble that I have, is the
Roping them back in.
getting them
Yes.
back in.
Yeah. But at the same time, if you don't let them take breaks, they
Right.
will take the breaks for you.
Yes,
Right.
they will.
Right.
And then you're gonna have even longer periods
Uh-huh.
of roping them back in.
Yep.
So,
And I just, I mean, I don't have an answer to it yet. My 6th graders do it. So it's not like it's impossible, because I'm doing it with 2 of my classes. But
I like the wait method personally. Like, okay, all right, like I'm ready to move on. When you are, you'll
Yeah.
let me know because you'll be quiet, and that works sometimes, but it also doesn't work a lot of the times. So I try not to raise my voice at the kids too much. I just try that calm and serene. But sometimes you just gotta lay into it.
Yeah.
yeah.
You have to be that mean person and just be like, look, you're not meeting my expectations, and I want you to do better because I know it's possible. But right now, you're not acting like you think it's possible.
I feel like that's the hardest part, though, taking
Going
away
anywhere.
something.
hey,
Um,
grab a snack
I think
and
that
join the
it's-
circle. And
It's important to stick to what you say. So if you're gonna, this is like, if I'm gonna give you a warning, the next time I'm gonna pull it. If you guys can't handle this activity, it's not gonna happen. And all too often, I find myself giving one extra warning, even though I shouldn't. But I do it. But once from there, I always feel bad having to pull it. But you have to, because if you don't do it, then if you don't follow through, then the students are going to know that, and they're going to be like, "What are you going to do about it?" You
Yeah,
know,
it's an empty
nothing.
threat.
Yeah, it's an
Yes.
empty threat, and then nothing's going to happen.
They can walk all over you then.
is there anybody tried anything new this year, like that you haven't done in the past?
Regarding what?
Classroom
Question 1: tips, tricks, and strategies for classroom management, routines and/or procedures. I don't know. When I've been in your room, I've seen like you're doing Cornell notes.
I did one time.
Um,
I started.
oh, by the way, if anybody wants Cornell notes, I've got blank sheets up there with extra pens if you want to take notes. And I'm not kidding. It's up there.
I believe you.
Yes.
That'd be all. You
So
know.
anything new this year? I'm trying to foster a better environment in my classroom. Having kids not talk down to one another and having them, say more positive things, and just not letting kids call out. Because it's so frustrating when I ask a question, a kid calls out, and the 3 kids who had their hands up just go, "Fine, I don't like." He just yelled it out. I don't get a chance to answer. So that's been my big change this year, is giving the kids better opportunities to respond to me. I think that's making a change.
Yeah, and that's hard because like some kids need that longer time to think what they want to say, and the other kids are like,
And if you have
they
your
want to yell out the answer.
You
And
have
I'm
your smart kid,
constantly,
yep.
and I'm constantly trying to get the kids raise your hand and wait
Yeah.
to speak. Because sometimes they think their hands up, they can speak,
Mhm.
and it's not fair to the person who needs more think time.
yeah.
I got away from those drill sheets,
Okay.
and I'm starting to put PowerPoint questions up on the screen, and I'm trying to get the hands up, just like you're talking about. It's like a warm-up kind of thing. And you can put almost any question up there, instead of just content, just to get them activated and try to get the hands up.
Getting them started off.
Yeah.
Calling out's a huge problem for me as well. I find that when that happens, either I'll do one of 2 things, or I'll say, "I'm waiting for someone with a hand up." I'll try to sometimes preface it with that. So before I even ask the question, I say, "And with your hand up, can someone answer for me?" And if they do call out, sometimes I'll do a little bit of planned ignoring, where we'll just pretend that it didn't happen, and I won't even reference it, because I think that it's really important that they know that you're not going to respond to them unless they're going to raise their hand.
Yeah.
And there's going to be moments in time when you're going to say, okay guys, like you guys, we're going to have a discussion where you might not need to raise your hand. But that needs to be set out. But I think that if they think it's okay to call out, then it's going to keep happening. And you need to establish that you're not going to respond to that. Because I mean, even just not even answering questions, I'll have people just call out randomly in my class and say, I have to go to the bathroom. And I'll say, that's great for you. I'm not going to let you go because you just called out in my classroom. So there's a whole other procedure to talk about the bathroom because with that, yes.
Well, it's good
And
to
I
know
think
we all.
that kind of feeds into what middle school kids are.
Yeah.
You know, they're that,
Or if you call out, you're ineligible for the next question, or something like that. You know.
right.
They're very impulsive.
They're so impulsive.
Mhm.
And that's middle school.
Well, what I keep wondering is, it's like, okay, here we are, the middle of October. I know I haven't acknowledged this ever since the beginning of school. So where are they learning it? Why do they keep doing it? And that's what I keep struggling with is like, who's telling them it's okay? Or is it 6 years of they're just so used to it that it's going to take more than, you know, the month and a half that they've in my room? But if we're all doing it, why are they still jumping up? I mean, I've got kids that, you know, get up out of their seat and they walk to me and they want to turn something in, or they want to show me the assignment, or they want to, and I say, I need you to stay in your seat. But I've got my, you know, well, if you're not going to check it, then I'm just not going to do it. And what I tell them, I need you in your seat. Everything starts when you're in your seat. I'll check it when you're in your, please stay at your seat. Well, if you're not going to do, and then they just, and
You know, in school, in elementary school, I'm sure the teachers are the same way. They don't want them to yell out. I think
Yeah.
more of it just comes from where they feel they could put people down if they're constantly doing that, and some of them are used to doing it at home. You know, they'll, Mom, can I do this? Mom, can I do this? Dad, can I do, you know, constantly asking, and then finally they get what they want. So they bring that into the classroom.
I find that sitting in the chairs is often really difficult for some of my students, so I've tried to do other things where I'll have a standing desk in the back of my classroom, and if students really want to go work there because they have a hard time standing up, I'm okay with that as well. My rule is that not so much as you sitting down in your chair as you staying in one spot, because that's the main thing that I'm looking for. Is I understand it, you got to be up and moving, but you have to stay in your spot, and that's kind of what I'm looking for, because I think that as teachers we can't just let them walk around the classroom as they please. But it's also our job to make sure that they're learning, and some kids can't learn if they're sitting in a chair all day in this position. It's just not conducive. Some of the students could be hyperactive, and they might not be able to. They might need to like fidget with something. I'm not saying a fidget spinner, but I'm saying that there needs to be something in your classroom management to allow students to be able to move somehow. You know?
And there's a lot of like,
Oh,
there's a
yeah.
lot of ways to modify your seating. Like I've got a couple, like they're just basically half inflated like rubber bags that just, it provides like an uneven surface that the kid can rock and back on. It doesn't create any noise or anything. I've got stuff like the bands you could put on the desk that the kids could just rest their feet on and press that. So there are other ways to get that sort of sensory engagement without having them up and about the room causing troubles. You know, give them jobs, you know, utilize their activity. You know, I know I've got one kid, Davion, and he's got a lot of energy. He's a great kid, but he will come to you in the morning and, you know, he is right next to your side nonstop. And it's like, until you give him something positive to do, it's like he is your guy.
Oh, exactly. Davion, I've got Davion in second period. First 2 weeks of school, he's, zipping around my room, and I don't remember, I wish I remembered what day it was or what it was that I did, but I was like, when everybody else was like divided into teams working on a project, I knew he wasn't going to be able to do this, so I told him, I made him my classroom assistant. I told him, okay, David, you're gonna be my, you're gonna be my, I forget what I called it, maybe it was just assistant, but, and I gave him something to do, some like, go check off when everybody's had this, or, my past, and I gave him a desk up in, in the back, near mine, and it's one of those low square ones, remember that you were looking at this morning?
Right.
And I like set it up and I said, okay, this will be and I called it his office. So it's like, this will be your office. Ever since then, he is quiet, still on task, except for like one day last week, like Monday last week, he was off. But Wednesday, he was back on track.
That's being a middle schooler. And and it's just
Yeah.
it's identifying those kids' needs and being like, this is what
Well,
I can.
I've got a living room area actually set up in my room, and I've even had like teachers
saw
come
that.
and sit.
Right.
I want it to feel like home. And some days, that's what a kid needs. Or some days, just because that they're 8th graders or 6th graders that I have up in my room, sometimes you want to lay down on the carpet and you want to read a book that way, and sometimes that's what a kid needs to actually focus, or to actually sit in a comfortable chair to read, or to have, your device, your laptop on your lap and be sitting
Oh,
and
that's
doing
what I
your
was
work
just
that
about to
way.
look at.
There's times that, that's the only way that I can focus. So I just figure, if I create this small area, and sometimes it's a rewards area, and sometimes they're like, can I just go over there for the day? If you just let me yes, go ahead and go over, So, and sometimes it totally works, and they can focus, and they're quiet, and they can actually get their work done. So, creating an area like that in your classroom is definitely, if you think about it in the younger elementary school classroom, they usually have like, a place that might be like a tent or something like that they go into. Well, we don't have like a tent, but it's kind of like the tween version of that. So
Where'd you get all your furniture?
actually it's patio furniture, and then the others, everything is off of Facebook and Craigslist. So yeah.
I think it's great that you're saying that too, especially because Mrs. Benzing right now is saying, Benish, why do you keep doing that? Mrs. Benish is saying that,
I'm confused with the B names.
I
man.
do, they're just hard. To make a fool of yourself and to remember that consistency and fun also. So I think it's great that you're saying that they need to feel like they can live in a living room. But I also think that they need to know that we're people. And I know sometimes that we're super strict on our rules, and that's always great. But I think making a fool out of yourself and also making them feel comfortable is really important. I think Mrs. Hockenbach was also saying how important it is to just smile. Because the
Yes.
students are not going to learn if you have a frowny face on the entire time.
Especially when you make a mistake like yesterday. Okay, so first I was doing attendance, and they're like, and of course I didn't even realize it was on the big screen. And they're like, Miss Steele, you didn't mark him absent.
Oh my.
Okay, so I go and I go ahead and I email Miss Jackson, and then of course, the student's last name, because I was being observed too, so there's the extra little level of anxiety there. So of course the student's last name I put as Jackson, and then one of my students said, you put his last name as Jackson. And I just looked and I said, Victor, I said, that's so funny. I said, Miss Jackson will figure it out. It's okay, and I was laughing at myself, So I had a moment of, oh, okay, whatever. I know she'll figure it out, and that I made a mistake, and it was okay to make a mistake, and he corrected me, and it was all okay. So.
And to chime into that, I always do the same thing. I'll say to the kids, I'm going to make mistakes. You'll catch my mistakes.
Yeah.
And point out to them, but it's how you respond to the mistake. Like you say nicely, oh, you made a mistake, and correct it. And that's what I like, so the kids know when somebody else makes a mistake, to say it the same way.
And Miss Lee, I'm pretty sure 8 times 4 is 32.
And I do that
And
right.
it's like, you wrote 34. It's like, oh, my bad, guys. Let's go back. Hey, guess what? We made a mistake. No big deal. We're moving on.
Right.
Just to jump in here, question number 2,
Okay.
just let's move on to,
Okay.
is how will you use your inquiry team to intentionally improve your professional practice this year?
I wrote down something like go beyond Cornell notes, or like what else is in the Avid that we can go beyond Cornell notes. I mean,
Trying to
there's
find-
tons more to it,
Mhm.
and we're just kind of getting used to it.
One of the things that about last year, hold on, I want to record this, but I forget which. No,
Press.
I'll just turn the phone around. I forget where my reverse button is.
Yeah, I got you.
Last year, I did all the training workshops to get certified in Avid and was like all over Cornell Notes, and I did it in my classroom. And what was missing was consistency within the school. The huge advantage that I have this year is our Avid team specifically, intentionally focusing on Cornell Notes. It's not me, I went to some workshop, I learned something, came back, I'm doing it in my classroom with my students. Now I'm doing it in my classroom with my students, and they're saying, oh, we did this in Mr. So-and-so, or we did this in Ms. So-and-so's class, or, oh yeah, we know about this, because it makes it so much easier to introduce a tool when other teachers, like we've all agreed, this is what we're focusing on this year.
And that was question 2, sorry.
That was question 2, yeah, so it's...
So you're talking about the inquiry team right now?
Mhm.
Okay. I think that a lot of the inquiry team seems to be about like responsive instruction as well, and to like kind of adjusting around to your students. So when you walk in and you do the lesson and it totally flops, you have to revisit the drawing board and say, all right, what can I do differently from here? And that's figuring it out. That's using those backwards mapping and seeing, all right, well, this is where I have to get to, but I know where my student should be is not where it is. So I might have to take another lesson to get them there. Yeah.
When I copy stuff off, I don't copy off 180 at a time, because I know I'm going to have to modify that thing again, maybe 3 times. So because something backfired or some ambiguities or whatever, and that's what I do. I just try to. I'm always.
Every lesson is different.
Every lesson is going to be a little, or I'm going to modify, and go from there. Yeah.
Well, that's what's nice about teaching the same topic in a couple of different classes, because you learn from one period to the
Yeah.
next where they're going to get stuck, and you have to make that change.
Speaking of the responsive instruction stuff, that also includes like you get an exit ticket at the end of class and you see, all right, these 20 kids get it, but these 6 kids don't. That's when you're pulling those small groups. That's, you're identifying those students that you can work with. I'm on the Avid Inquiry team, and we're definitely utilizing Cornell Notes. The big thing that I'm trying to build in is just several more Avid strategies, which we'll talk about a little bit later. I think that's question number 3. Fostering that more, positive environment in my classroom and building more of a team as opposed to a class. And then the real big thing is it's giving me an opportunity to lead and teach adults. Since I'm one of the leaders of the inquiry team, I've never really had to teach adults before and train them. So it's an interesting experience because it's very different than working with kids.
But it's a lot alike in some ways too.
It is a lot alike, but at the same time, it's like, all right, I feel kind of bad asking someone who's a 10-year veteran, to, hey, I need your eyes up here. I don't want to talk down to you like I would talk to a middle schooler. So there are certain ways to talk to and ways to address adults that I feel like I'm learning better strategies just working as a leader.
And I think
Just
that'll follow into the classroom even with the middle
Exactly.
school kids. It really is all interrelated.
Just so we don't get all, I'm noticing myself being distracted with tweeting and talking and all, but Mr. Chamber, I tweeted that we're here, he likes it, so that issue off the table.
How do you?
I like what Barrett's doing though, where he's referencing
I've got
tweets
tweets
that
I don't know what's
ridiculous.
going on.
Right, and that's, and like I said, if
How do you?
to the extent that contributes, that's great, but we're here to be live and
Chit chat.
chit chat, and so that question is been resolved, we're good.
All right, so I mean, I've like tweeted like twice in my life. And
Don't worry
I
about it,
had-
we're
I had
good.
to- But I think, how do you add stuff? How do you like start a tweet?
That, we can like have that workshop another day.
Yeah, let
Yeah.
me double check that this
Um,
camera is on right now, because
Yeah.
I saw that the red
He's
light
just
is
saying
on.
that we're good since we're here. Right.
The camera's in.
Yeah.
Well, one thing I think I'm really doing this year is trying a lot of new things. Like, we spent half the
Yep.
morning reorganizing my classroom the way it's set up. And I just kind of feel being here that this school is so open to taking a chance and trying new things,
Yeah.
which I truly appreciate.
Now, which inquiry team, you're on Avid, I'm on Avid, which inquiry teams are you on?
Responsive.
Yeah.
Okay.
Is that contributing, helping?
Yeah, yeah, I mean, it's responsive. Well, you know, you're always, because you're always changing, and I think certain parts you use more than others.
It's just good teaching practices, really. That's what the inquiry teams focus on. I mean, Avid's about good teaching practices. Responsive is about those good teaching practices. PBL, I guess if you like projects, you know, it's harder to do in some classes, but they're still beneficial to our students.
Because when we had that like week-long workshop of responsive instruction, I mean, going in, I don't think I quite realized this, but I like, figured it out along the way when I was trying to learn, okay, what's this all about? It comes from special ed law. It's like you follow the law down to the states, down to the counties, down to the schools. That's what responsive instruction is all about, and it's being like the traditional model. The teacher teaches to the 60% of the kids in the middle, and the 20% at either end of whatever spectrum you should are left out. What responsive instruction is, my understanding, is what's intending to do is to take this 60% in the middle of the traditional, I'm teaching, you're going to learn, this is, you know, middle of the road, and take that 60% and expand it to, say, 80% or even 90%, so that more kids are more inclusive in what we call the regular lesson, the regular classroom, the regular, so that the, you know, gifted at one end, special ed at another end, or whatever, that those populations actually are smaller and become more specialized.
It's great that you guys are talking about PBL as well, because the Department of World Language, as well as Mr. Berkowitz, is talking about PBL as well, and it seems like that's a big push as well. So it seems like a lot of people are talking about that, and I think that project-based learning, I think, is most effective, especially when you make it most about your students. So if you can find that problem in their backyard, I think that's what makes it the most effective. And getting them to like make a difference, if they feel like they can make a difference, then I think it even pulls even more. So for example, I've done like some project-based learning where it wasn't necessarily local to home, but it was about air pollution in New Delhi. And it was really important because the students felt like if they were able to compile this research, then they could actually write a letter to our government and say, listen, this is a real issue, why are we not stepping in? It uses all of that. They're learning about everything science related while also trying to solve a real life problem. And their research is making a difference. And I think that's so important for these kids, because sometimes you just hand in a project for a grade and you clap your hands and you call it a day. When really you want to make that difference, and the kids want to. So if you can do that and reach out to like your local senator or something like that, or even put this, what you just learned, out into the internet somehow, that's huge for those kids, I think.
Just trying to send a tweet.
Is that,
This is really
are you on project-based learning inquiry team?
No,
Oh,
no.
okay.
I'm in responsive
Responsive.
instruction. Yeah,
Oh, okay.
yeah. So that's my inquiry team. but I think that PBL is great too. My responsive instruction that I've been learning has pretty much been a lot of backward design. So really finding what's our goal, and then going backwards from there. So we've been doing a lot of that, and also kind of differentiating your instruction as well. So when a lesson doesn't go well, figure out what went wrong from there and how to improve upon it. So that's kind of what we've been doing in ours. But I'd like to talk more about PBL because I think it's really important. And especially now that we're a magnet school, it seems like PBL is going to be pretty much
Oh, yeah.
It's going to be a big
now.
push in,
It's going to be real.
our
It's-
magnet ID.
I mean, it's a big part of the IB program, the model. The school I was at before here, so 4 years ago, it was Baltimore Lab School, and it was a all special ed school that did like all the classes, all the grades was project-based learning with an emphasis on the arts. And I was a math teacher, and I had known what project-based learning was, but this was the first time I was in a school where school-wide was like, okay, this is what we're doing. So I was doing great at skill development, but it was like, I was 2-3 months there. It's like, you're really great at skill development. Get moving on to project-based learning. And I was like, okay, how do I do this? So one of the projects that I did that I was like, worked really well and so proud of was I called it, What Color is the School? And I just took digital cameras, and each kid, so I had across all my 3 classes, I had, 20-some kids across 3 classes. 6, 8, and 7 were my class sizes, I guess. And so the kids went around the school, and I told them to take a picture, a digital picture of what they saw, what they thought represented the school to them. So capture your vision of what, so some kids took a picture of the whole front of the school. Some kids found their favorite place to go, be, and they take a picture of that or something. And then I printed the photos at about this big, 13 by 19, went to a paper cutter and sliced them all up horizontally and vertically into 1-inch squares. So each 13 by 19 photograph was about 150, 160 squares. And it was kind of on heavy paper, so these were
Puzzle.
it felt like paint chips.
Okay.
Okay? And then we took all these colored and divided them into colors. So all the reds, all the blues, all the greens, all the browns, all the light blues, the dark blues. And then they counted how many of each color they were. Then we got another sheet of paper, and they pasted them all down to make a bar graph of all the different colors from high to low. So every kid's photograph got turned into a bar graph showing the percentage of each color that was taken from that child's personal, and made what, effectively was a nice piece of art that we then posted up all around the school. And that was the project of the project-based learning, or the project-based learning, or the problem-based learning, was starting with a question that the kid actually cares about, that starts from the kid's interest, not me telling you, here's your set of instructions for problem-based learning, step 1, step 2, step 3, but it's start with a question. What do you see around the school? So every kid's was different, but it was also personalized, but the math was essentially consistent across all of them. And that went really well. I was so proud of that.
And it doesn't sound like a complicated thing.
Not
It's like it's
terribly
not-
complicated, no.
I think project-based learning, and I think this, big, thing of some big essential question that needs to be answered, or it's just
Trifold
yeah,
board.
like, what color is the school? Like, it's so approachable for a middle schooler.
Now, the project that my 6th graders did, I think it was my 6th graders, was counting traffic. Because we were on St. Paul Street downtown. And so we literally, every class for like a week or two, we, for 10 or 15 minutes, walk outside, go sit, it was a fenced in, there was a chain link fence between the playground and the street. Sat down next to the fence and counted cars, but counted, like each kid had a different, you're counting buses, you're counting trucks, you're counting small cars, you're counting SUVs and minivans. And then one student was the reporter, the recorder, and one student was the timekeeper, depending on their ability levels. And so with that, it was counts, and again, percentages, and so it was generating the data to do percentages and averages and counts and things like that. But again, it was like student driven, and it was the reality of it was traffic in front of our school is a real thing. It's what is the traffic in front of our school? It was a real issue. It wasn't like, ooh, I found this great project online that somebody from Kansas posted, and that went really well, and they liked it. And I'm trying to remember how we turned that into an art project, though.
Well, that follows really nicely with what question 3 just posted is how will you incorporate literacy strategies into your teaching practice as a whole?
Literacy
or your
strategies. It changed?
What?
Oh yeah, there it is.
I thought
Literacy
it was average
strategies.
strategies. or is that the
No,
fourth
it is.
one?
So he also posted the average strategies, like the 20 best average strategies on Twitter. There's like this Pinterest page of all these different average strategies, and a lot of them go through like taking notes, and then one of them is like the Costas levels of like questioning poster, which is like a stoplight, where it's like the level 1 is like found directly in the text, level 2 means more than one place to find the answer, and level 3 is not in the text. So it seems like there's like a lot of average strategies here on this Pinterest if you guys want to check that out to see a bunch of things. But I think that a lot of the things that we've been talking about is trying to incorporate those strategies into it. And I think that a lot of literacy is trying to push those Cornell notes, and even just getting them right now to take it. Because I find that when I've been talking to people about how they're doing it, we're just learning to take the notes right now. They're not even at the level where they can start making the questions in the margin, because this is a step-by-step process. But I think it's so important to just take those first steps, because just the other day I had a student tell me, or tell their parent, like, oh, we don't take notes in science class. And I said, oh, really? So I was like, well, I'll make sure to tell you that now, because there are things that we go over, and then I expect the students to have their Cornell notes out, but because I say it, but then they don't do it. So it's really making sure that they're doing it.
So once we're talking about Cornell notes, how do you want kids to use Cornell notes if you're talking, you want them to write things down? Or if there's a PowerPoint maybe, how, besides our reading?
What I do is anything that I do that I'm going to ask my kids to take Cornell notes on, I take the notes the day before. So I actually go through, if I've created a lesson and I say I'm going to give a lecture and I'm going to have my kids take notes on this. Sure, usually I'll pair it with like a PowerPoint.
Okay.
Alright, so if I do something like that where I'm, up at the front, I'm giving a PowerPoint, I'm having them work through stuff, I'll go through and identify, okay, this definition is important. I need to make sure that when we get there, I'm telling the kids, you need to put these into your Cornell notes. This is something that's important for you to write. Show them a copy of my notes that I made the day before to say, look, my notes are about this long. It's about a front and a back. You can use more space, you can use less. See how I've left space on my notes so I can fill them in. See how I have pictures and how I've organized the notes. And just showing them your example doesn't tell them how to do it, but it gives them an idea of where to start. So doing something like just creating those notes the day before and knowing what topics you want them to get, and what key essential ideas they need to have down, I think that really helps drive the focused note-taking part of Cornell Notes, because obviously copying everything down from the PowerPoint doesn't help, or copying every word from a paragraph in a reading doesn't help, but being able to identify those key things and pull them out.
Yeah.
I think knowing what you're going into as the teacher helps you tell the kids what they should be looking for.
Well, in the GT6 curriculum, they have to read the text the night before. And so working with them, setting up the notes, a lot of times during our discussion, I'll say, okay, if this isn't in your notes, add it, you're gonna need it. And I tell them, I do the same thing. I read the sections and have notes that I take. And, I tell them, even though it's personal, there's certain things that you should include in notes. You have to make it so it's easy for you to be able to go back and use the notes. If you're just writing to write, then there's no use for them.
Well, and that's the whole purpose of the Cornell Notes, is they're supposed to become a study guide for the kids. Now, we're not at the point where the kids are creating study guides for themselves, but the idea is they have information on the side, questions they can quiz themselves on the left, with answers in between. So that's the end goal, and I think telling the kids why you're doing the Cornell Notes, telling them, look, the reason I'm asking you to do this, I know it seems silly, I didn't like it when I was a kid, but really here's the science behind it, and here's what we're going to be doing today, and this is how we're going to extend this tomorrow, and really laying out, like what we said earlier, talking about an agenda, like always letting your kids know, this is what we're doing, and this is why we're doing it. I think are the real big reasons. Those are those real big pieces.
One of the things that I struggle with along those lines is how much I have to break things down because it is so just new. And things that, it's like I read the curriculum guide and it's like, okay, this is, a 1, maybe a 2-day activity, and it's like, okay, step 1 is a 1-day activity. And like you said, but exactly like what you said about, you taking the notes the night before, and it's, and this is what I remember like developing this idea, coming up with this like last year, and that is the higher order thinking that we're trying to like build towards is they're capable of doing it, perfectly capable, perfectly, there's nothing wrong with these kids' brains, but it's the culture of being inquisitive is so foreign for so many of them that what seems like whoever in August is July is writing these curriculum activities, they don't get it in 1 or 2 practices, but they will with 10. And that's what I like last year with Cornell Notes. I was using Cornell Notes like a lot, to the point that kids would, when they wanted to do something that wasn't necessarily like me directing, okay, this is a Cornell Notes activity, and pass out a sheet of paper, they would walk up. I just kept a stack of blanks up on, in the front counter. They would walk up and go get one because it was a framework that they visually recognized. But it took, it was measured in, weeks, maybe months, not days. And like accepting that timeline is, just really frustrating.
I talk to my inquiry team and I say, look, if you have your kids writing a summary by Thanksgiving, you are miles ahead of everyone else. If you have them, writing the questions by Thanksgiving, that's probably, okay. But understand that that's doing Cornell Notes most days from the start of the year till Thanksgiving, and your kids are just starting to get it. So understanding it's a process and they're not going to get it right really helps build the whole mentality. Look, this is something we're going to build. This isn't something that's going to happen overnight. It's just like Rosemary said, it's not a 2-day activity. It really is like our kids will see the benefit, their junior year of high school. They're not going to see it when they leave in 8th grade.
Even with teaching English, getting them beyond the 3 sentences
Mhm.
for a paragraph, let alone having an essay that actually makes, sense and actually flows
Mhm.
and has, the wonderful, logical way of actually going. It's difficult for a lot of my students. So the ones that, actually I've got, it's a perfect pie of quarters of who's doing what in my class. It's really, really kind of interesting and frightening at the same time. The ones that are doing really well, I kind of just let them be and let them go ahead and do what they need to do. The others, I try to go ahead and come around and, make sure that they're pacing themselves the right way, and the ones that are on the lower end of the spectrum, making sure that they're paired up with the ones that are doing really well, and kind of instructing the ones that are doing well, saying, hey, school isn't just about the grades. School's also about leadership, and can you learn to be a leader here? Can you learn to also be a teacher? Because you learn a lot more in school if you're also a teacher too, and try to setting that up in my classroom a little bit more. So
I think George wrote something great on Twitter, and a lot of people are commenting as well, but using Wolfpack strategies during readings and just extended writings, allowing students to break down the work.
Yep.
And it seems like Mrs. Wmmsvpd was saying how she uses that a lot in science, and I know that a recent article that I did as well, I was using the Wolfpack strategy, and I felt it was a great way for the students to actually pull key pieces of information out of there, because especially I think these students have a hard time sitting down and reading something, but it's nice that there are strategies to do things even before you're reading. Like when you're reading, you have to do in pack just like number the paragraphs.
Yes.
Like that's the very first thing.
And it's very
before you
simple.
even do it. And then ask 2 questions about the title. And those 2 strategies are before you even read it. And I like that because it allows the students to start to make predictions before they even read something.
Mhm.
And I don't think they do that enough because they just look at the article and just go, I have an article to read. But instead, if you try to pull out key piece of information, for example, like if I was like looking at someone's Twitter handle and they had like this name or something like Edutopia, I would assume, hey, they're probably talking about education. I wonder what educational things I'll get from it. But that's me starting to make connections and figure out what I'm going to read from this. If they have some article about like some biology in the world about like maybe, I don't know, trees in the rainforest, they'll say to themselves, I wonder what's going on with the trees in the rainforest. Something's probably going on. That's them making connections before they even read it, and I think that our students don't do enough of that.
What's also nice for the special ed part of me is that somebody that has anxiety because they're not a good reader or not a good writer is, okay, I can do these simple things to get started. And it kind of, that anxiety kind of gets broken down a little bit, and then they see themselves getting launched into the activity, and then they can go ahead and get started into the reading or the writing. So
Just breaking things down into
Yes.
smaller parts. They might not get it all at one point, but they can get part of that, so you can feel success.
Mr. Chambers just posted the question 4, but this one was a little bit revised. So the new question 4 is, what is the thing you must must happen this year in order for you to have the most success in your class? So what is the thing must happen this year for you to have the most success in your class?
Can you repeat that one more time?
Yeah, sorry. What is the thing
I don't think it's you.
know? What is the thing you know must happen this year for you to have the most success in your class? So he's asking what has to happen in order
Okay,
for you to have a
alright.
successful class.
Okay.
That's what we're getting.
Yeah.
How are we, I've tried to post these tweets and I can't see anything I posted.
it's
Is there-
just the way it
Is
is.
there a big lag or something?
There can be,
Yeah, they're kind of.
yeah.
So I think that's a very broad thing to do, but if there's one thing I've realized that you have to do is the students have to know that you care, regardless of whatever you're teaching. That is the most important thing for you to succeed in class.
Right.
And you know what? Sometimes you're gonna have to be, sometimes you're gonna have to be a jerk. But the thing is, you have to be a cool jerk. So I started reading, and I've been doing a lot of readings, but there's a fine line you have to cross between either being cool or being a jerk. If you're cool and you're really awesome, the kids are just going to walk all over you. If you're a jerk, they're going to hate you. You have to meet somewhere in the middle where sometimes you're letting things go and sometimes you have to say, no, it's not going to happen. And I think that that's that's the success in your class, is knowing when to toe that line and how to handle those situations, because shutting them down isn't always going to work. And I've been doing that a little bit too much, and I'm trying to remember that these kids have opinions and that they have lives, and to be successful, you have to figure them out.
Well, they're middle schoolers, and the relationship you build with them
Yeah.
determines what reaction you can have, because the kid that doesn't like you, you're not going to play around with, whereas the kid that does like you, the phrase I like to use is, it's like, you're being a butt or I'm being a butt. It's like, I could be a butt with him because, I could pick on this kid and
You
have
can
fun
rap-
with
you
him.
can rap too.
Yeah, because I've built that relationship with this kid, whereas this kid, I know if I did that same thing, you get a very negative reaction.
Yeah.
So it's definitely understanding your relationships and,
Yeah.
like you said, toting that fine line.
I think I've always thought about the idea of being more of an advocate than an adversary. Like you, along the way, you try to convince kids you're on their side, and that, so many ways you can demonstrate that instead of being like, it's the teacher and the teacher's, and, maybe not in my corner, so to speak. So
It's stuff like
just-
this year, I'm instead of giving graded assignments, I'm allowing my kids an opportunity to show me what you've learned. So it's not something that I'm out to get you. It's not something that
There
I'm
you
out
go.
to get
Not
you
out
like
to
a
get
pop
you.
quiz.
Yeah.
It's, look, I want you to show me what you know so that you tell me we're ready to move on. Because if we're not, we'll spend more time on it. But this is your opportunity to say, Mr. Bensley, look, we get it. We're ready to go. Not a, I'm trying to grade you and I'm trying to put you down. It's, well, you're just proving to me that you guys are doing what we said we've been doing. So it's rephrasing that, it's putting things in a positive spin.
Along with what you said, that same approach I use when I'm talking to parents.
Yeah.
And every phone call, it's, I like having your child in my class. I want to make sure he succeeds. I'm here to help him.
Right.
But here's what I need from you.
Yep.
He needs a reminder to, stay in the seat, stay focused, leave the phone at home, whatever it is. But that relationship issue, it goes to parents also, because, again, it goes back to, okay, what teacher along the way was so adversarial and cranky that parents assume that I'm going to start an argument with them? Because it's like, we're all nice. I've never been mean on the phone to any parent. So it's like, why would they think, but that seems to be the starting point, is that it's going to be adversarial. And it's like,
Yeah, you always gotta have something good to say, something positive.
Yeah.
Like, let's look forward. What can we do differently, kind of thing. Yeah.
I think you also have to remember, you have to be flexible. And in middle school, sometimes they drive the lesson. Like, you can kind of look out and you say, I had this great lesson planned for today, but you just kind of feel that it's not going to work. You kind of have to be flexible and do something else. Maybe, something happened earlier in the day, and you just have to kind of read the students.
but what I keep getting frustrated with along the lines of flexibility is flexible in ways that, like, I can't even anticipate. It's like, I'll anticipate 20 different things that I might need to be flexible about today. And they'll come up with 10 that I hadn't even, it's like, where is this coming from? And that's where it's like, okay, this level of flexibility is like, all right. It's like all these AVID workshops I went to, and I follow a bunch of other teachers from other schools who are AVID, teach the AVID program or AVID coordinators, and I see, these rooms full of students all doing like everything at the same time, like on task, on cue, and it's like, it works. I know these, like, okay, we're gonna do an AVID cheer. I know they work, but then it's like in my classroom, I get 24 kids going 24 different directions. So it's like, okay, I can account for this and 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 this, and then I ran out of, like,
For me, though, I've been in so many schools that are technologically behind. and, you know, catching up on the technology, as well as, you know, being in the different regular school environment is going to be a challenge for me. So, and a new school on top of it. So,
I think recapping what everyone's saying here is that Hunt on Twitter said that complacency is the enemy of accomplishment. If you're comfortable in your teaching, I think that's the wrong way to go. I think that every day you need to figure out what you can do to improve. Because there's always room for improvement, and I think that goes along those two.
Hey, come on in, grab a piece of cake.
Just be better. Straight up.
Seriously,
Yeah.
we got plenty.
I think that most people are just finishing up their last thoughts, so I mean, I guess we could do our closing arguments here, and we're all set. One thing I also wanted to share is Mrs. Wmmsvpd and also Mr. Chambers is saying that they want our students to be more empathetic as well. And I think that that would create a really successful school environment in general. Because I think that if we can teach our students to be empathetic towards others, I don't think we would have nearly as many behavior problems. Because if they understood how they were affecting others, I think that that would solve a lot of things. But it's so difficult to teach someone to feel other feelings for people. It's not something you can just teach, it's something that they have to learn for themselves. So,
And
Maybe
they
there's a
need
brain
to
pop
see
on
it.
that. I don't know.
But
I,
they need to see it in different, you
Well,
know, in different situations. Like, they need to see, oh, well, the teachers all get along. And then, you know, some of them don't see that at home as much, so we need to make sure that we show it to them.
Well, I mean,
here.
very specifically, what you said, it's like, there are, like, in the curriculum for college and career readiness, there are specific activities in units about learning about myself, learning about community, teamwork building. And again, that's great, but it takes so many repetitions. Whereas a kid that has been in a, I don't know, traditionally well-functioning school where all of the supports, community and family supports are in place, and that kid has grown up in that kind of environment, great, 1 or 2 practices, you're introducing a new idea, the kid gets it. But when I've got a kid that I know his home life has been hectic for the last 12 years, I can do that, but 1 day isn't going to do it. 2 repetitions isn't going to do it. 6, 8, 10, maybe we're getting there. And that's where I get into, okay, that's going to take a lot of time. This takes a lot of time, this takes a lot of time, this takes a lot of time, this takes... And it's like deciding, okay, what gets left out?
Mr. Chambers has concluded the PD day, so if you guys want to just make some last statements, you guys want to...
I think one thing in teaching, you want to see that result right away. And like you're saying, it takes time, and I think sometimes you see it when you bump into that student 5 years later, and they say something to you, and you're like, wow, I didn't think that kid was listening, but you didn't, but they were. And I think being a teacher, you have to sometimes take that breath and wait. They'll get it. It's not immediate, especially middle schoolers.
it's definitely delayed gratification.
All right. Hashtag be better.